Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and you saw last week at the BET Awards, there was a performance by Chris Brown and Lil Wayne for a song called "These Hoes Ain't Loyal," and this led to a pretty interesting debate online about whether or not the term "these hoes ain't loyal" is disrespectful or not. You saw the week before, Pastor Jamal Bryant he quoted Chris Brown at the pulpit, and people were outraged. Clutch Magazine was outraged. A lot of New York feminists were outraged. But then Chris Brown and Lil Wayne performed the song "These Hoes Ain't Loyal," and suddenly everyone's afraid to say anything, maybe because they're afraid of BET or something like that. At least that was my take. But there's someone here who has a different take, and I love to hear all different kinds of opinions. I respect everyone's point of view, so I encourage you to disagree with me if that's how you feel. Patrice Danielle Donelson is a contributor for the very popular dating website idatedaily.com. She writes lots and lots of good articles and gives lots of good perspectives, and she is in that Beyonce age range, and she's here to talk to us today. How are you doing today, Patrice?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Now, you saw what I was saying online about these hoes ain't loyal. You know where my position was. My position is that this is disrespectful to women. He's not just talking about some women; he's talking about all women. If you ask Lil Wayne, are you talking about certain women or just the hoes? I don't know if he would necessarily say, or better yet, sorry, let me rephrase that question. If you ask him, if you use the term hoes or bitches, who are you talking about? I would argue that most of the time, Lil Wayne, Chris Brown, when they say bitches and hoes, they're talking about a lot of women, not just certain ones. But you had a different point of view, and so I'd love to hear what that point of view is.
Okay, so first I want to say when the song first came out, I was one of those people who just paid attention to the chorus and thought that, it was just another one of those songs degrading women as well. And the more it became popular and the more I listened to it, I really did listen to the words. And at that point, it was around the time where they had performed it on BET, and obviously after the performance, it was getting a lot of radio spin, and that's when, I started seeing your statuses and the controversy about the song. And I have to say, after listening to the lyrics, it really is like they are drilling in on a specific type of woman. Normally, when it comes to these hip-hop songs and they're referring to, bitches and hoes, excuse the language, it does sound like they're talking about a woman in general. But if you pay attention to the lyrics in Chris Brown's song, he's specifically talking about a woman who, is with a broke man, runs across a rich man, and all of a sudden leaves the man she's with, is only concerned about the money that the rich man can offer her. In Lil Wayne's rap verse, he's talking about how all she cares about is her 9-inch, heels. All she cares about is the money. And we have to admit as a society that there are a lot of women out there like that. And I think about the women like, the Kim Kardashians of the world, excuse people who are fans of her, and her type, the video vixens, and everyone who's running around trying to date a man and sleep with a man for his money and make a come up off of a rich man. And to me, they're not loyal people. They do leave the guy they're with for the next person who's richer. And these are who the rappers and music artists decide to surround themselves with. And so these are the women they know. So what's the difference between them coming up with this song talking about the hoes who aren't loyal? And in my my point of view is that a hoe is someone who sleeps around with multiple different men at the same time, or sleeps with a man for his money. It's an offspring of the word whore, And so if they're surrounding themselves with these people and they're venting about it in their song, then what's the difference between them doing that and Nicki Minaj talking about looking ass niggas and, Beyonce talking about men in a song where she's bashing them? What's the difference?
Interesting. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read some of the lyrics from the song. It's called Loyal, actually, and I'm just going to read them as they stand, no censorship here. Lil Wayne's verses: I wasn't born last night, I know these hoes ain't right, but you was blowing up her phone last night, but she ain't have her ringer nor her ring on last night. Nigga, that's that nerve. Why give a bitch your heart when she'd rather have a purse? well, I give a bitch an inch when she'd rather have nine. I don't think he's talking about 9-inch heels. It almost sounds like he's talking about 9-inch something else.
Oh,
But I'm not sure. I'm not here to speculate on that. You know how the game goes. She be mine by halftime. I'm the shit. Oh, nigga, that's that nerve, etc., etc. So he goes down. And in the chorus is that when a rich nigga want you and your nigga can't do nothing for you, these hoes ain't loyal, these hoes ain't loyal, yeah, yeah, let me see. Okay. Now, now what's interesting is that when you referenced, the subset of women that might be defined as hoes, which it sounds like maybe Jamal Bryant was saying the same thing, right? When Jamal was speaking on, and this actually supports your point, I think, at least in the way he was using the term. He was saying to women that men are smart. His audience was mostly women, and he was saying men are smarter when they choose a good woman, a godly woman, etc., because these hoes ain't loyal, right? So it almost seems like he could have come back and, made an argument and said, look, I wasn't talking about all women. I was talking about just the hoes, right? Now, it was interesting, though, because you saw a lot of feminists still were outraged by what he said, when he was in church. Clutch magazine, a lot of the New York feminists that really get riled up on certain issues, they had a lot to say. But when BET sort of elevated this performance by Chris Brown and Lil Wayne, there was really complete silence. I didn't hear much from them. So, do you think that based on what you're saying, do you think that also not just lets Chris Brown off the hook, but it also lets Jamal Bryant, the pastor, off the hook for quoting Chris Brown in the pulpit?
I think that I don't think anyone should be let off the hook. I think that you could have one point of view on this. And if someone originally, was attacking Jamal Bryant, I don't think he did anything different from what, Chris Brown and Lil Wayne did. I do think that in their song, they are separating out women who act as hoes in society and who aren't loyal. And it sounded like that's what this pastor did in the pulpit. So if someone was upset with him and then all of a sudden was quiet after the performance, I think that they are then being hypocritical.
Interesting. Okay. So one thing that's interesting is you mentioned women who sleep with men for money, and women who sleep with lots of men. And it seems like that's a very thin line and a slippery slope, right? Because most women want a man that has more money than a broke man, right? Most women do not want a broke man. I mean, I wrote Financial Lovemaking, right? So my argument is that women like men who can provide, right? And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's just as natural as men wanting a woman with a pretty face, long hair, nice booty, whatever it is that men like. People like what they like, and there's a biological reason for that.
Right.
And then when you mention women sleeping with lots of men, it seems to me, and again, I'm not even really arguing your point here. We're just having a conversation. You're just showing that people can disagree and still learn from each other. So it's not a fight. I want to make sure people understand that. But when you talk about promiscuity or a woman who sleeps with lots of men, it's interesting because that's also kind of an ambiguous thing, right? What does it mean to sleep with a lot of men? And what's interesting to me too is that most women will never tell you how many men they sleep with, right? So if you ask Chris Brown, I say this as a guy, if I'm sitting with a Chris Brown kind of guy, I know some Chris Brown type dudes. I'm talking about guys who have the swag, the money, the fame, etc., where lots of women will publicly deny any connection. Like I would never date a guy like that. But what they'll say to me is, man, these hoes ain't loyal. In the background, you get these girls in private, it's a whole different story. This girl who's married or who's saying this out in public, when you get her by herself, she'll do X, Y, Z. And it almost seems to me at that point they're not really just talking about a certain segment of women. They're really talking about a large majority of women. Like any woman who is captivated by a winning smile, a lot of money, a lot of fame, a lot of power, which is a lot of women, right? So do you think that there's a dangerous line that we're kind of crossing when we allow a rapper or a singer to say, hey, when I say these hoes ain't loyal, I'm not talking about all women. I'm just talking about the hoes.
No, I still don't think so, because first, when I say sleep with a lot of men, I mean sleep with a lot of men at the same time. So I think that there's a huge difference between someone sleeping with a lot of men and, whatever their number may be, and them doing that at the same time, multiple men at the same time. Also, I think there's a difference between wanting a man who's a provider and sleeping with a man for his money. And I've had lots of different debates about this with people. I think that all men and women the same want someone who's, goal-driven, who's, someone who wants to provide for themselves and be something in life. And so if you have that built in your character, then there's no way you can't provide for a family. So someone who's broke and has decided to be broke and sorry and not do well for themselves or set goals for themselves, there's more to just that person than not being attracted to them just because they don't have money. It's not being attracted to them because they're not driven, because that's a turnoff, because it looks like you're sorry and you're not going anywhere in life, and like you can't be the provider of a household. Now, I think there are truck drivers out there who could be good providers of a household. There are people out there who manage Walmart who could be good providers of a household. And then there's doctors and lawyers who could be good providers. Then there's football players who could be good providers. A hoe, to me, looks at these men like dollar signs and doesn't look at them for their character. They're immediately looking past the truck driver, past the Walmart manager, and probably past the doctors and lawyers and going towards those football players, going towards those people who make millions and who also have the fame because that's what they want to be attached to. To me, that's a hoe.
That's really interesting. So what if, so do you think that it's, if you look at the way the song's written, they describe scenarios where they're able to steal another man's woman because, he's only got an inch and he's got 9, or she's broke, or he's broke and I'm rich, etc. So does that mean that she's then a hoe? Because think about it, the logic follows then that where there's, they then say these hoes ain't loyal because look at all these women I can steal from their broke ass boyfriends, right? So would that make a woman a hoe? Let's say that she's with a guy who doesn't have any money, who isn't good in the bedroom, who doesn't satisfy her in whatever way she wants to be satisfied. She meets Chris Brown. He's got the beautiful smile, the angelic voice, whatever it is that women love about him. And she goes and she either sleeps with him one time, or let's say that she starts a relationship with him. Does that make her a hoe?
I think that if she's interested in him only for his money, and that, to be not happy is one thing, and to leave someone because they don't have as much money as someone else who's pursuing you is another. And so if there's a woman who's happy with her broke, quote, quote, because what does he mean by broke? Does he mean he's a lawyer? So he's still way broker than Chris Brown. So let's say he's a lawyer, right? So she's happy with her broke, quote unquote, broke lawyer boyfriend, but meets Chris Brown, who has, the cars, the house, and can give her anything that she wants. And so she immediately leaves this relationship she's happy in to go and chase the money. Yes, I think she's a hoe.
Interesting. Okay. Last question I want to ask you now. This is a little more personal, but I think it's an appropriate question. I've met your dad. Your dad is I respect him a lot because he's a smart, strong man. He's a real black man in what I call the age of wussification of black men. Your dad is not a wussy. So and I'm sure he loves and protects his daughters like any good father would do. Now, let's say that a guy wants to date you or date one of your siblings, and he sits down with your dad, and your dad says, well, why do you want to date my daughter? And let's say that the guy says, well, sir, your daughter is a good woman, and I'll tell you that's a nice thing because most of these hoes ain't loyal, right? How would he respond to that statement, you think? It's not a trick question. It's just a question. I'm just curious.
In all honesty, I think that he would think it was inappropriate for the guy to be using that sort of language in front of him. But I think he would think the same thing if the guy used any sort of, curse words or derogatory language, So I don't think he would necessarily think he was disrespectful towards women. I think that he would think it was just inappropriate to be using that language in that setting. Now, knowing my dad, if this was somebody who he'd known for years and who I dated for years, and he'd seen the way he treated me, and the guy used the same statement, you know, at some family gathering, and we were talking about, you know, females and all of that, and he said, these hoes ain't loyal, he would probably agree. My dad's a realist. He would probably say, yeah, you know, in the sense of talking about these hoes out here, and, you know, if you believe in the definition I believe of, he would think, yeah, if you're talking about these women, they aren't loyal. They are hoes. And he wouldn't, you know, think that the guy was disrespectful towards women or anything, because he'd then know him and see the way that he treats me and know that he's talking about hoes and not his daughter.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. Okay. You're a big Beyonce fan. You're right in her
Yes.
age demographic. And Beyonce's a feminist. Now, would you describe yourself to be a feminist at all, or how would you kind of look at that?
You know, I disagree with a lot of the well-known feminists out there, and the people who made a name for themselves as feminists, who everyone knows. But I consider myself a feminist in my own way. You know, I do believe in the empowerment of women. I believe that, you know, women are equal to men in a sense. But I do still feel like women play a role in life and men play a role in life. And the two can't be intertwined. So, you know, a lot of feminists will say that we're equal and we can do everything a man can do, and we don't need a man. And I disagree with that wholeheartedly. But do I believe that, you know, we should be empowered, that we shouldn't be, you know, in a way, this whole conversation, I think, has brought out the feminist side of me, because I don't understand why we should go, you know, turning off our radios and packing up our CDs and deciding that we're not going to listen to Chris Brown anymore. Why aren't we talking about the fact that people should be better parents and shouldn't let the BET Awards and his performance raise their children? You know, why are we looking towards the women to be all upset about his performance, when as grown women we should know real life from fantasy? We should understand to separate ourselves from the hoes he's talking about, and we should, why aren't we looking towards men who are less well off and asking them why they're not upset about him talking about all the broke men out here? Or why aren't we, like I said in the beginning of the conversation, asking men not to idolize Nicki Minaj's booty and body because of the way that she, you know, bashes them in her song, or Beyonce, or any beautiful woman for that matter? We don't ever tell the men to go cutting off their songs or stop looking at them with glazed over eyes. But as soon as Chris Brown comes out with these hoes ain't loyal, women are supposed to be upset and not listen to Chris Brown anymore. I mean, to me, I'm like, no, you know, we can listen to Chris Brown. I know the difference. I'm not a hoe. And honestly, I think that he is talking about people who are hoes and aren't loyal.
Interesting. Okay. So, you know, what's interesting to me is that, and I think that the good point you're making here is that not all feminists are created the same. Right. You know, there are feminists, and then it almost sounds like you might even be in that womanist category that says, you know, a woman's right to be who she wants to be should be respected, no matter what that really is, right? And it's interesting to me too, because you know, when you think in that traditional sense of feminism and what it means, my perception has always been that that a lot of feminists would take issue with the idea that there is a man defining what a hoe is, right? Like, oh, I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about the hoes, right? Or almost like a white guy saying, well, you know, these niggers ain't loyal, and he's standing next to a black guy who says, I'm offended by what you said. And he say, no, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the niggers. You know who I'm talking about, the niggers, right? And I'm not even asking you to necessarily defend that. I'm just giving, you know, throwing thoughts here. And then I think the other interesting thing too is, you know, we can't forget that, you know, Chris Brown in his history of abuse, right? And what happened with Rihanna and the black eye and all this other stuff. And I think that and it's funny, and it's interesting. People can actually Google a CNN interview I did about Chris, where I defended Chris, not because I felt that he was a good person or that what he did was okay, but I said, look, he's young, he made a mistake, he should do his time and then go on with his life. He shouldn't have a life sentence for his mistake. But at the same time, what he did I thought was atrocious. So, do you think that there is a mixed message sometimes it's sent, to men, right? When you're saying, as a woman, as a feminist, or as a womanist, whatever it is you would define yourself to be, I want to be respected, but yet at the same time, I'm going to glorify this guy, who has beaten women, who talks about bitches and hoes, who has some pretty objectionable lyrics in his music that would be degrading if they came out of the mouth of Jamal Bryant or out of the mouth of someone who I didn't think was cute, who didn't have a sexy voice. I mean, do you think that there's a contradiction there?
I think that there's a lot of different reasons other than this song why people, should be in the past or at this point, disappointed with Chris Brown. And, first, when it comes to his history and his abuse, I've forgiven him personally because I think that everyone messes up. I think that he was very young. And I've forgiven him for what he's done. I specifically think that the person who he abused has forgiven him. So how crazy would I look for not? But aside from that, he's also done a lot of things to put himself out there in a negative way to society. I don't know. I don't know enough about him to know if he disrespects women on the regular. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't think it's contradictory to demand respect, but then idolize Chris Brown. I think that it depends on why you're upset with Chris Brown. If you're upset about him abusing Rihanna years ago, then, I for one think that's ridiculous. And so I think that if you've forgiven Chris Brown, but you still demand respect, it's not a contradiction. Chris Brown messes up, and just because you've forgiven him doesn't mean that you can't demand that a man never punch you in your face, Yeah, so that's what I had. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, you did, and really, I think it's important to communicate to people that I don't think this is an issue where you have to fight about it. I have strong feelings about it. I still think that we got to be real careful in terms of the message that we communicate to each other. When I would talk to my daughters, I would tell them, you have to be very thoughtful about not just what you say, but what you do. And so, I would take a greater issue with a guy like, say, Lil Wayne, who has actually literally made lyrics about murdering women and sending their dead bodies back to their boyfriend. And, and I told them that it's kind of hard for you to say, I demand that you respect me or that you treat me a certain way, but yet I am crazy head over heels for this guy who has talked about murdering me and sending my dead body back to my boyfriend. It doesn't justify what anyone else does. It doesn't mean someone has the right to hurt you, but what it can do is it can make a man think, for right or wrong. A young man could think, well, wait a minute, if I'm the nice guy, she's not going to respect me. But if I'm the thug, if I don't respect women, if I call women bitches and hoes, and I do all these other things, then maybe I'll get the same respect that Lil Wayne is getting. People emulate that which they deem to be successful. That's why maybe little girls sing and dance like Beyonce, because they see that men think that's attractive, and so they want to be attractive too. So maybe they emulate that. It doesn't make sense. It's wrong. It's ridiculous, but it's life, right?
Right.
So that's my thought. But I'll let you get the last word in there.
No, but I totally get what you're saying. I think that when going back to this song in particular, you brought up a good point when you asked people to define the word hoe, because I think that it plays a big part in how you could look at this song. And then, I also feel like when you're talking about people, trying to emulate these celebrities and stuff, a lot of it really goes back to households and how people are being raised, because again, from since I can remember, music was always a fantasy. It was always a good time. It was always a chance for someone to dip off from reality and enjoy the sounds, you know what I'm saying, and dance and do those things. And so I just think that, the person who is dating a woman who listens to Lil Wayne and automatically thinking that he needs to change and that, she wants a man to treat her like that, it says a lot about his mentality and how he was raised and, the strength in his, how secure he is. Because I just don't think that a man should base how to treat a woman off of the music she decides to listen to. I think that we should totally be conscious of some of this stuff that's being said in the music, and some of it is absolutely ridiculous. I have to agree. I'm not defending all rap and all these lyrics at all. It's really just this song that I'm defending. But also, like, we kind of have to think about how much we're letting it control us as adults. Like, we should all know, again, reality from fantasy, and we should all be better parents in teaching our children what reality, versus fantasy is.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that where we might end up agreeing to disagree, but of course your opinion is totally respected here. You know that I think that media plays a huge role in how people see reality. Even back when A Different World came on, they were showing how great HBCUs are. People wanted to go to HBCUs. The HBCU attendance rate shot up. Now, when people see the romantic relationship between Beyonce and Jay-Z, I've heard young women say they want a man like that. They want the corporate thug, stuff like that, right? And so I think that for whatever reason, right or wrong, hip-hop especially does influence the way a lot of people think, because there's an authenticity to hip hop that's very different from what you might see in the movies or anywhere else. In the movies, when Denzel Washington plays a certain role, he'll come out and tell you, look, I'm not really a corrupt cop, or I'm not really a carpenter. I just played that in the movie. Whereas Lil Wayne he can't come out and say, well, no, I'm not really a thug. I'm not really a crip. I really wouldn't kill anybody. Oh, no, that's just all for music. That's all for show. I'm just pretending, right? And so to some extent, he's representing a lifestyle that is being marketed kind of through the music. And whether we like it or not, it seems that so many households now are not structured properly. A lot of it's due to prisons and,
Right.
Parents being caught in the system. And everywhere I go in the south side of Chicago, you're seeing that played out everywhere. You're seeing guys dress like the guys they see on TV. They're getting the tattoos like the guy they saw on BET. They're getting the dreads. Before Lil Wayne, guys didn't wear dreads. Now you see dreads everywhere, right? Guys rocking their dreads or whatever, And I think it's interesting just to see how this affects how people think. And I think there's also this interesting, you talked about being a realist, and it's interesting to me that when you talk about being a realist, it's like, okay, we can always talk about the way things should be, and then also we have to balance that with the way things are, right?
Right.
Like parents should do X, Y, Z, but what are parents really doing? What's really happening in these households? Well, a lot of kids are being raised by BET, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
it's true. I mean, I have to agree with you on that last statement.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
You have to do something about that. And again, like I put it back on, what are we telling the kids and what are we doing as a society to make sure, that the kids aren't relying on Chris Brown and Lil Wayne to tell them who a hoe is, or, tell them how to treat people. And that's true. That's true. I agree with what you said.
All right. Well, I want to say thank you so much for your time. This has been a great interview. You've given me so much food for thought, and I really enjoyed talking to you today.
Thank you. I enjoyed talking with you as well.
Absolutely. Everybody, this is Patrice Danielle Donelson. She writes for the popular dating site idatedaily.com. That's idate, D-A-T-E, daily.com. So just an I. Her articles are great. She has great insights, and her opinion in many cases is very different from my own, which is why you should go check her out, because my goal is not to get you to think like me. My goal is to get you to see all the information and to think for yourself. So until we meet again, please stay strong, be blessed, and be educated. We are gone. Peace.